let's pretend that you have an Excel spreadsheet file and you have to set up 10 different worksheets. Or it could be that you have the same presentation information and PowerPoint slides that have to automate using Olay to spreadsheet data and charts using object linking and embedding. And let's say that you have to automate that process. Or let's say that you have to enter repetitive and ridiculous amounts of the same information in Word documents for newsletters. Or let's say that you have to automate email notifications of data output and patterns that you pick up in experimental data. Or let's say that you're working in Access with data tables and your query, the queries that you have to engage are the same type of thing over and over again. Any of those Office applications, any of the Office applications can make use of macros. And what I'd like to do is to explain what you need to do for your 4.0 assignment. So you have an assignment here, 4.0, where you are going to have access to the demonstration I'm about to perform with you. And I'll put a link in here for this, but basically you need to perform 2 tasks in order to log credit for this. Actually, this is supposed to read 2 points. So you're going to do 2 points. Yeah, it's actually for 2 points. The first thing you're going to do is open up a brand new Excel spreadsheet. And you're going to name your spreadsheet with your first initial and last name, followed by the phrase macro automagic. Does everybody see this? Macro automagic. So your first initial, last name, and then the other thing that should clearly be showing here is your license, your login for the UVI version of Office that you're working with. Now, if you're doing this in a computer lab or you're doing it on a Mac, let me know. But essentially, you should be able to download a copy of Microsoft Office 365. And when you're logged into UVI with your UVI account, it should show your name here. You go into File and under Account, if you haven't signed in, so that your name shows up here, there should be an option to sign in. You see sign out here because I'm already signed in, but once you sign in with your UVI account, it'll show your name. This needs to be prominently displayed in your spreadsheet. So a condition of your first task is that it clearly shows your name with an appropriate label, right? And your account showing in the upper right corner. I want to see a 1-to-1 correlation there. Now, if I don't see that, it means basically that, you know, you could be using another system, but you're not using your system. And in order for this to work properly, you have to have access to your own Office software, and all of you pay technology fees. So it's important that you get to use that. Any questions before we continue? All right, moving right along. So as long as your name and the file name are specified and your account login is clearly showing in the upper right corner, you hold your pointer over this and it says you're signed in. At that point, most students need to take action to display the developer menu. And you'll see here that the default state of Excel or most Office 365 applications is that the developer ribbon is not exposed. So in order to complete your first task for the macro assignment, you're going to go to the File menu once again, only this time select Options. And when the pop-up window appears, you'll select Customize Ribbons, and you'll scroll down and select Developer. The developer option would be unchecked here. As long as it's selected, it'll appear. Once you do that, you can select the developer ribbon. And so your name, your sign in, and the macro options will be showing. At this point, what you want to do is capture a screen. So you'll hit print screen. You'll go ahead and save this, right? You could save it as, you know, assignment 4.0, task 1 or something like that, right? Any questions about the first task for your 4.0 assignment? Okay. So what are you going to do once you are at a place where you can actually use macros? One thing you want to do is make sure that in order for this to function properly, you won't be changing the name of the worksheet. When you change the name of the worksheet, what will happen is that that naming convention, when you repeat the execution of the macro, it'll throw an error and it'll basically say that name has already been used. And if you try to change the name in advance to run the macro, that also creates another little wrinkle in terms of referencing with the macro code. So one thing that we're going to do differently this time is that you won't be changing the name of the sheet, but what you will do is first select cell A1 before you start recording your macro. You want a common point of reference to launch the macro, and in each case, you want to remember where it is you start when you select the macro to repeat the function again. You want it to start in the same location. So this is column A, row 1. I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to click record macro, and I'll give I'll call this macro magic 1, right? Macro magic 1. And I'm not going to assign a shortcut key, but I could assign a shortcut key. The only problem with working shortcut keys is that for some reason or another, there's always somebody in each class that picks a shortcut key that's already been previously designated, and then they'll use Control X or Control C, and then their copy and paste doesn't work. I'm exaggerating just a bit, but that's pretty much what happens. So we'll leave that option blank, but that's a really cool feature. In order to run the macro, all you'd have to do is assign like a letter. You could say Control M, I guess, for magic, and then every time you press Control M, it would launch your macro. You can store it in different locations, but basically we're gonna keep this default setting for this workbook. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now, the icon in the upper left corner should change. So instead of saying record macro, it now says stop recording. So at this point, what I'm going to do is start my activity on this worksheet. I'm going to navigate down to C5. And I'm going to pretend that I'm working a series of experimental trials where with each increment, I'm increasing the amount of rainfall that's applied to rainforest plants in a controlled setting. And I want to increase by 5 centimeters each time I run the trial. So I'm going to go ahead and enter 5. And I'll actually come up here and I'll type rainfall in centimeters, right? I'll use title case here. I'll say centimeters since it's a title, right? I'll go ahead and double click the border between C and D columns just to open that up. And I'll select my home ribbon and I'll go ahead and make this bold and center it, right? Just so it looks nice. And I'm going to go ahead and center the rest of the numbers that I'm working just to make those look nice. And what I want is about 15 or 20 iterations. So I'm going to run from row 5 to row 20. And that'll be plenty. Or no, let's just run from 5 to 15. Okay. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a formula to fill down to 15. We've already done fill downs. I'm going to come down one cell level to C6 and I'll put in the equal sign and then move my up arrow. So this cell content will equal this cell content plus 5. So basically, as I hit enter, I'm using the value stored in C5 and I'm adding 5 to it. Does everybody understand how I have that initial formula? I'm going to take my handle. That's what this is referred to. You notice the crosshairs change when I move my cursor into the dot on the lower right corner. And I'll drag this down to 15 and let it go. And now I have rainfall in centimeters. I also want a view of how much rainfall I have total. So I'm going to select I'll go ahead over here and I'll highlight both columns here. I'll fuse them. I'll put a border around them. And I'll put a description in here for, I'll say total rainfall in trial, right? So now I have a description. I'm increasing the width, so that looks nice. Then I'm also going to repeat my borders, right? Just so I have a nice, kind of a nice box here to work with, right? So at this point, what I'll do is I'll select my bottom C16 and I'll drag up and then go ahead and click the sum option. And this will give me a sum of the total rainfall in centimeters, okay? Now, at this point, I want to create a chart. So I'm going to start with the title and highlight this down, but I don't want to include the total because that'll throw my chart off. I just want to see that the pattern of increase has been consistent. So for visual people that I'm reporting to, I'm going to go ahead and insert a chart. And I'll insert all charts. It'll be a line chart, basic line chart. I'll go ahead and pick that and say okay. And now I have a handy dandy chart. Okay. So at this point, what I'd like to do, let's do one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the A column, and I'd like a little space between my label here. So I'll insert, right? I'll insert a column, insert a sheet column. And what that's going to do is it'll automatically modify all of my formulas, right? So instead of being C, now it's D. I've inserted that, but it just kind of gives me a nice open space for which I can produce results. I'm also going to highlight all of this, right? And I'm going to go ahead to page layout and I'll set the print area so that when I print this, and I'll do the page layout. It'll do a landscape and I'll use wide margins. So basically when I print this kind of thing, I'll have a handy point of reference for how I've set this up for printing. Now, obviously I've gone to a lot of extra trouble a lot of extra features. But what I'd like to do now is to go back to my developer menu, and I'd like to stop recording. And at this point, I want to prove that this thing works. So I have in sheet 1, rainfall in centimeters. I have a total, I have a progression, I have a line chart. If I had to repeat this thing over and over and over again, I'd like to go ahead and use that macro. So I'm going to click to start a new sheet. I'm going to make sure that my cursor begins in A1. And then what I'm going to do is a quick series of builds for sheet 2, 3, 4, and 5 in quick succession. And I'm going to basically replay the macro each time so you can see how this works. As long as I'm in A1, I have a new sheet. I'm going to play the macro. I'll run it. Bang. Everybody see that? Sheet 2, macros, run. Bang. Okay. Sheet 3, run the macro. Sheet 5, run the macro. Now, it's kind of interesting. If you look here, you see that macro didn't run with any errors, but you do see that this is blanked, and it could be that the print area itself is creating a challenge for the dimensions, but that's something that you can troubleshoot. You are welcome to repeat the same activity without inserting the new column and work in a print area, and that would probably simplify things. What you'd get is this result without any modifications. So one thing about automation features is that you want to try them first before you deploy them in production environments for this same reason. So once again, when you perform the second task of your macro assignment, you can omit adding an extra column at the end when you're building your macro, and that would do it. There are ways to edit macros or to convert them into code. We're not going to go into that right now. But at this point, what I want you to do is to click on one of your other sheets to show that you have the same setup here. I am noticing a difference here. It looks like it's inserting the extra column. Everybody see this? There's one column here and there's 2 columns there. So I wonder if deleting this, I'm just curious. I'm going to delete the sheet column. Doesn't really bring my chart back. Just thought I'd try that. It's kind of an odd wrinkle. Anyway, when you do this for your own submission, don't worry about adding an extra column. At this point, you're going to take a second screenshot. Make sure that it shows your name at the top. Make sure that you're clicking on one of the other sheets and that it shows the same basic information on screen after your macro has been running. Any questions about the 4.0 Wield macro power assignment?
No, I've been copying what you've been doing for a while, and I think I have it put down pat.
You'll want to save your Excel spreadsheet and just save it with that name. So what I'd like you to do is to go ahead and you can submit screenshots for both tasks, but also submit the Excel spreadsheet. And that's what you need to do to complete modules. I mean, the module 4, first assignment in module 4.